Welcome to the Cash Flow Couple Podcast, where we go behind the scenes in our short-term rental business and reveal tips, tricks, successes, and failures. Whether you have 0 units or 100 units, this podcast is for you. I am your hostess with the mostest, Wendy Williams, along with my husband, the man, the myth, the legend, John Williams. How you doing?
It's Friday.
Is it Friday? I have no idea what day of the week
It actually is Friday, yeah. So, yeah, I kind of want to be like, it's Friday, but it kind of means nothing to me other than Friday is normally like...
Check-in day.
Check-in day.
Yes.
So, if I look at our data, most people check in on Fridays because mostly you have your weekends booked, right? So, always want longer stays, but Fridays are... or check-in day typically for us, and Sunday is check-out day, and then we try to get weekend days. So.
Well, and it's Labor Day weekend too. So
it is Labor Day weekend.
We are fully occupied.
So that's one of those things that's kind of interesting, is because holidays we're always like, I hate holidays because the bank's closed, and I don't get deposits on holidays, right? That's the kind of way I think about it. But on the other hand, on holidays, people come stay at your units as well, so that's always a good thing.
Yep. They sure do.
So it is Labor Day weekend. So I think we're full up.
We are full up this weekend.
So across all 7 units, we have people staying this weekend. That's a positive.
Yes, and now we have 7 units to monitor.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of monitoring.
The reason we say that is...
So last weekend we had...
Yeah, we left the last
17.
Podcast with... Would you title that eventually? Like,
oh, gosh. Bad Guest Busted. Yeah. That's right. So we had 17 people stay at one of our places, but it turned out well. They did eventually comply after we spoke to her. She called me on the phone so that she could get back in the property, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because we locked her out.
We did do that. I don't know if that's like we should be telling people to do, but that...
Well, we wanted the guests to contact us, and we were not getting anywhere through the messaging. So we decided to contact them directly via phone, and it worked. So they did eventually comply. I reiterated that no more than, was it 8 people?
Yeah, so I want to say in the last podcast we did, it was in the middle of it. So it was like Saturday, like it was like this weekend. The people check in Friday, they were checking out Monday, I think, in that case.
That's right.
And we recorded the podcast on Saturday, like night or something, or Sunday. And so it was kind of in the middle of the reservation, but so we were dealing with it. But they did actually comply, which was good.
Yeah, this is what we do on an exciting Saturday night. This is an exciting Saturday night for us.
Well, that's not like the norm. It's really not. You want to say like this doesn't happen like all the time, because I was listening to...
What, bad guess, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You hear all these horror stories.
It's true. It's very...
short-term rentals or whatever, and those are always the stories that get told, and then some of it becomes like...
makes good stories.
It makes a good story, it does, but it really doesn't happen all that often.
It doesn't. The majority of our guests are very, very good and compliant.
I mean, I'm happy to scare everybody off, and like I can handle it. But really, it doesn't happen that often. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Oh, it will happen eventually.
You got to have, you got to expect that it's going to happen
for sure.
But it's really not, we tend to tell like the bad stories, not the good ones. And I hate to say that because we had like kind of that experience this middle of the week, like on a Thursday.
That's right. That's right. There must have been like a full moon or something, because we weren't the only ones.
You're right.
That had that problem.
Yeah, we had this issue.
That had problems.
It's not the one we were just talking about. That was last weekend. But
so this weekend it went even further.
Friday, so it was actually yesterday.
So this weekend we actually had to remove some guests. Like last weekend they complied, right? So we didn't have to remove them, but this weekend We actually had to go to the property and remove a guest, which is the first time that we've ever had to do this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the situation ended up being, what do you do if the person that booked the property ends up not being the person that showed up, and then when you message them, they don't respond?
Well, no, she showed up. The
right.
lady that booked the property, so she said that when she made her initial reservation, she said it was her 10-year-old, her 16-year-old, and her 17-year-old, and that was it.
Yeah, and I should preface this by saying that I took a last-minute booking.
Yes, red flag, so number one.
Our real policy is that we do not take same-day bookings. I know some people do, but in our market, where we are in Charlotte, typically that's not a good idea.
It's not the client you want to serve.
It's definitely not the client we're trying to serve, but I made a bad judgment call. I take total responsibility for that. And because I was in, and this is kind of a mistake, and I always want to say, like, every podcast we do shouldn't be like, here's all of our mistakes. People suck ass because they constantly make these mistakes. But the reason I tell you this kind of thing is because you won't hear this on other kind of podcasts, right?
That's true.
They're going to tell you about here's all the glorious things that always happen, and you can make all this money.
You can make all this money.
And that is true. All of that is true.
It is.
Because we do experience that side of it as well,
That's
which is
true.
why we do it in the first place. But it would be dishonest to say, oh, no, it's all rainbows and
unicorns and fuzzy puppies or whatever.
Fuzzy puppies. And kitties.
Fuzzy kitties,
Don't
yeah.
leave out the kitties. Because I got a story about that, too.
Oh, God. What is it?
Well, I didn't mean to go into it right now, but I had a reservation or a request for a reservation this week.
That's right.
Because currently the hurricane is
Dorian.
It's
coming up the Florida coast.
Yes. And so because we're in Charlotte, we'll get requests from people that are in the Florida region or maybe South Carolina or wherever it's going to hit. And they'll say, hey, we want to come and stay. And I got this one this week from a lady that's like, I'm having a really hard time finding a place to stay. And then she went on to tell me that, well, I have 3 dogs, 3 cats, and there's 2 of us as humans. And my thought is, I understand why you're having a hard time finding a place to stay. And we do have 2 pet-friendly locations, but they're not like 3 dogs and 3 cats pet-friendly.
And I'm not worried about the dogs so much as the cats.
Oh, yeah. And it's not that I hate cats. We have a cat.
Oh, my God. Cat piss is so hard to get out.
Oh, you're right. And so just think, I mean, emotionally, I'm like, I love cats. But business-wise, I'm like, dude, there's going to be like 3 cats in our place for like a week.
Right.
Along with their dogs. And cats, like, they get stressed out, man.
Oh, man. Totally.
And
totally.
Cat urine's terrible.
Yep. And it is, you can't get that out.
So there's
not a hardwood floors.
Between like, okay, now I can like charge more for this, but I need to charge enough that, because I know I'm going to lose something on the cleaning side of it. So it's like, I need to charge like something high enough that I'm going to actually come out ahead. And so I did send a response back with a rather large fee for that many pets. And they may or may not book, because it's that kind of thing where, like, if the hurricane actually hits them, they might come here. And if it doesn't, they won't. But that's kind of a side issue. That's
Wait, different. What were we talking about before?
That's not what we were actually talking about. I just thought it was like a really interesting story. And it's...
Wait, what were we talking about before?
Because I'm sure that like most people that she contacted were like, oh, hell no.
Right.
Hell no.
And John's like, yeah, I'll do it for a whole lot of money.
I'm a capitalist pig, man. I mean, I do have empathy because I do love animals. But at the same time, I'm just like, it's going to cost me money, man. I can't subsidize your lifestyle choices. But
right.
If you want to come, here's what it's going to cost
Here's what it's going to cost you. Yes.
So that's the beauty of capitalism, right? There's a place for you. Here's what it's going to cost you.
Yes, okay? Exactly.
But anyway, so there was that kitty story.
Kitty story. What were we talking about before the fuzzy kitty story?
Well, we were talking about, it's not all unicorns and
oh yeah, that's right, and fuzzy kitties.
And fuzzy kitties, and then we went off on a side story.
Okay, go back.
So we had the situation last weekend,
right? Yes,
and they actually ended up complying, which is fine, and
everything was fine.
I will say technically they didn't comply, but they didn't. They did and they didn't. In other words, they were supposed to have 8 people there. They ended up being 9, but they weren't loud and they didn't trash the place. And it was
the other family members didn't come and go.
Right.
And,
it wasn't 17 people.
Right.
Okay. And they weren't like having a party. It was just whatever. Okay. They were whatever. Not horrible, but we had to say something, because it's a residential neighborhood. Most everybody else there is not short-term rental, right? So there's people this is actually a townhome. So like literally the people on either side are full-time residents, and you got to be sensitive to that and respectful of them. And people that come to your short-term rental are maybe not as worried about it as you are. And so you have to be the person that sets a good example so that, first of all, there's not like people like on the news saying, hey, this place had a party.
That really bothers me because I'm the type of person that is very conscientious about other people. I take other people's feelings into account when I do something like this. I'm not going to be really loud and be disrespectful to in a short-term rental when I go stay in other people's short-term rentals. You just don't do that.
You don't, but we're more mature. I want to say older, but we're more mature too, right? And if you're thinking about, not everybody's that way.
I know,
you're
and it
dealing
just
with the general public.
Really bothers me that people are inconsiderate like that and don't think about their neighbors. Is it just that they don't care because it's not their place?
We kind of had that discussion on one of our other ones, but they have a different perspective, right? They're there for a specific reason. Like this one, they were there for a family reunion. So they're there to have a good time. They're there to visit their family. They have a different perspective on it. Like in their mind, they rented a home and they get to use it for that particular period of time, right? And they're not really necessarily
thinking about other people,
all your rules, and thinking about like there's other people that live there. I mean, that's not the purpose for their stay. And so a lot of times you have to I feel like you almost have to put that in front of them up front and say, hey, I realize you're here for a good stay. I understand your perspective, but here's the situation you're in, and you're in a residential neighborhood where people do go to work. I mean, they're not on vacation. They're not here for a family reunion, and you need to be respectful of that. And I think there's kind of a disconnect between the purposes, between who's there permanently and who's there temporarily as far as their objectives. And you almost kind of have to moderate that a little bit sometimes. But again, most of the time it's not an issue. We're talking about the 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 20. Even if it's 1 out of 20, that's not a lot. But it does happen. And so you have to kind of be on top of that, because after they leave, we're still the people that are running the short-term rental, right? In the neighborhood.
Yeah, it makes us look bad.
It could, yeah.
to the neighbors.
It could, yeah. If you don't stay on top of it. But I think people will respect you more if you are operating responsibly. And if you have an issue like that, then you address it instead of just let it go on, which means you have to have a way to know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have security footage, security cameras in there so that you know.
Well, that's one of it, yeah. But whatever your system is, I don't care what it is. I just want to know that you're actually actively monitoring the place in some way. I mean, I can tell you what our system is, which is really good. But you have to have some kind of system. You can't just like be like, hey, I watched a YouTube video and they said I could rent a place and then like put it on Airbnb. And then that's all you do because, again, 9 times out of, or maybe 19 times out of 20, it's fine. And you're like, I'm a genius. Right? And then that 20th time comes up and all of a sudden you're on the news and you've created an issue for the entire neighborhood that now everybody else is going to say, see, I told you about those Airbnb properties and people shouldn't be able to do that. And that's how legislation comes up and, you know, all this kind of thing. So,
you know what? I'm okay with that. I am okay with legislation that makes people become compliant in certain aspects because it's a security issue.
Yes. But how do you become part of the solution rather than just part of the problem?
Well, that's the question, right?
And I think a lot of the knee-jerk reaction, you see that a lot around the country is, okay, well, it's just banned here. You can't do it. Or it'll be like, well, you can do short-term rentals.
But only in your own house.
Right. Like you can rent your room in your house. Because that's the first thing people say is like, well, I depend on this to supplement my rent or my mortgage.
Right.
And so a lot of times they'll make carve-outs for those sections of the population. But I was listening to somebody else's perspective today, which I thought was really interesting and it totally made sense to me, was that, you know, if you look at before Airbnb, before HomeAway, before any of that, short-term rentals have been going on for a long time.
Sure.
And at least here in North Carolina, I think of them as like when I go to the beach, I rent a beach house.
Vacation rentals,
it's the same thing, except for Airbnb did not exist, right? So I contacted it. They were professionally managed. And they were, you know, you contact whoever the realty company is that's managing that place. Or maybe that individual owner said, hey, I don't want to use a realtor, and they put an ad on Craigslist or in the paper even, right?
Right. God, how old are you?
Well, come on now. I'm pretty old. I've read a paper. They do have them still.
I'm just messing
my point
with you.
is that short-term rentals aren't a new thing in that sense. It's just that they tended to be vacation destinations.
Right. That's what I was going to say. They're more like the beach or the mountains or popular cities like where people go on vacation, like Florida. Florida's not a city, but
yeah, you both said it at the same time.
You know,
but yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
New York,
here, it's Myrtle Beach,
Denver, any place in California. I mean, for Pete's sake.
Right, but they're popular vacation destinations, and nobody thinks a thing about it. And they work very well because they're professionally managed and they're professionally regulated.
See,
right
now you've hit the nail on the head right there when you said that word regulation. They're regulated.
Well, think about this in North Carolina. You cannot manage somebody else's property that you don't own unless you're a licensed person.
That's true. I am a licensed person.
You are, but if you weren't, you couldn't just be like, hey man, I'll manage your property for you. You couldn't do that, right?
That's right. You can't do that.
And the great thing about that is that, well, there's pluses and minuses because I kind of have a bent against too much regulation. But at the same time, there's compliance. There are problems. Of course, people have parties at beach houses and stuff like that.
Well, we did when we rented a beach house.
But we didn't have like a bad party.
That's true. No, we didn't trash the place.
I'm talking about like trashing the place. It's not really a problem. Yeah, does it happen? Yes, but nobody thinks of it as they get trashed all the time. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And it's because they're professionally managed.
Yep.
And so it was interesting to me today to think about that, what a lot of municipalities are doing, saying, hey, you can't have professionally managed places, but you can have like rent a room in your home.
See,
that's backwards. Isn't it?
Yes, I would think so. I mean, I would rather have someone that is a professional property manager because they have to be compliant.
Well, the compliance is the big word. So how do you make sure that people are actually compliant with, I'm renting a room on Airbnb, but yes, I live there?
That would be a problem,
house
right?
Say, do you live there? Right. I mean, that becomes kind of so it's kind of like the natural thing that a lot of people would think, like, that's the solution, right? Like, we don't want it in our neighborhood, but hey, if my neighbor wants to rent out their room, I'm cool with it. But it's almost kind of like that's really hard, for one thing, to like police. And two, that's not the model that has worked forever before all this other stuff. Yeah,
that's kind of a newer concept with the shared economy.
You should say, hey, if you're a professional operator, then here's your license, here's your compliance, here's your stuff that you need to do, whatever that is. And then almost say, nobody else can do anything. And then we'll start adding in, okay, well, if you have a room in your house, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
That is probably the better way to go. And that was something I heard today that kind of opened my eyes to be like, yes, because that's the way we're kind of self-regulating at this point. Meaning we're doing the kind of things that should be required of everyone, in my opinion.
And that's why I am not afraid of regulation. Because
I'm already doing it. I want it kind of that way because
because
it gets rid of that idea of you're doing something that's going to ruin the neighborhood, or you're doing something that we're going to have a bunch of problems with, or whatever, right? Because just little things like we were talking about, so we were going to swing into this. We were talking about this earlier, like, what are we going to talk about? So we had a situation yesterday. So we're recording this on Friday. We had a situation yesterday where I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. We had somebody check in like last minute, and basically what it came down to is, I'll just say it plain out. They came in the property and basically they set up shop to sell weed. That's what they were doing. And we could talk about like all the things that happened, but that's what they did, because they did not show up with suitcases. They did not show up with any luggage or anything like that. The person that booked it, who was a lady, said she was coming with her 3 children. Well, her 3 children looked like, well, they had beards for one thing. They weren't children.
They were not children.
And she did not show up to the reservation. It was like 4 men.
Yep.
Okay. And then she did actually show up like occasionally. But just knowing what I know, I'm pretty sure they came up here for a couple of days to deal weed.
Yep.
And that is something that does happen occasionally. That can happen, and you just have to know that that's a thing.
Buy an ozone machine.
People will rent your Airbnb under false pretenses and set up shop. And if you're not set up to say, hey, I recognize this activity, this is what it looks like to me, and go take action, then you might be one of those people in the neighborhood that people are like, I don't want this in my neighborhood because they were like drug dealers.
You remember our friend said that somebody installed a stripper pole in one of her places?
Yeah, somebody did that. One of our somebody else we know that rentals actually had somebody that installed a stripper pole in one of their they do apartments.
Oh my God, it was so funny.
And then tried to lie to them and said, oh no, we're just a fitness pole instructor.
Right, yeah, sure.
Like installed it in the apartment, floor to ceiling. Like kind of like a tension rod.
Kind of like a tension rod.
And had people coming in and out every
right, sure.
20 minutes or whatever.
Sure.
Which is impressive, by the way.
Yeah.
20 minutes.
But anyway.
And that's basically what happened with these people. They showed up, and then like people started showing up like every 20 minutes. I'm like, I don't know exactly what that is.
Yep, for sure.
And so we had to actually end up going over there and getting rid of them, which I don't know if I would say, hey, you should go do that and confront your, but that's what worked for us this time. You know.
I don't know if we will continue to do that. I don't know that that's going to be our standard operating procedure because it's not scalable. But I think it is important for us to have that experience.
Sure.
Because now we know a possible conversation that's going to happen when we talk to a guest that's doing this.
Yeah, but tying this back in, what I was going to tie this back into was if in Charlotte, North Carolina, short-term rentals were regulated and we had an official license for that property, then now we are able to partner with the authorities, partner with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg police.
And they would understand our business model and be able to assist us.
Yes, because we could say, hey, we're having this problem at one of our registered short-term rentals.
Right. And they would already know.
Because what a lot of people will make, I saw a news article about this today where somebody like showed up at somebody's, quote, Airbnb, which we never say, but they're short-term rental, but they did rent on Airbnb, but actually their payment didn't go through. And they basically just squatted in the property and said, we're not leaving. And it was somewhere in California.
Oh, okay? Lord.
But at that point, you know, when you show up and you try to throw people out and you call the police, you got to be very careful in this environment because there are no regulations. I'm talking about California, but in Charlotte, there are no really short-term rental regulations. There's no official short-term rental license. There's no any of that kind of thing. So if you show up and you call the police and you say, yeah, I'm evicting these tenants.
That's not
and use that
something
kind of language,
they're
going to tell
do.
You, oh, well, that's a civil matter. You need to go through the courts to evict tenants. Nothing we can do for you. Bye. Now, if they show up at the Holiday Inn, that's not a problem because they know what the Holiday Inn is. There's no doubt that those people aren't tenants, right? And they're out. But if they show up at my house over in whatever part of Charlotte, I've got to be very careful to say that I'm the leaseholder. These are my guests. They're no longer welcome, and now they're trespassing because the police cannot do anything about anything that's not criminal.
So trespassing is a criminal offense.
Trespassing is a criminal offense. So I got to be very careful that I don't say they're tenants because they're not. And I got to be very careful to say that I'm not evicting them because that's associated with tenants. And I got to be very careful to say that I show up with my lease and I show up saying, I am the leaseholder here. These are guests that are no longer welcome. And they're now trespassing on the property. Because the police are going to show up not knowing anything. And they're going to go to those people and say, where's your lease? Do you have a key to the property? No. Because we don't give out keys.
Right. So that's in that instance, it would be very helpful for the police to already know that we are operating a short-term rental business at this location.
So I welcome regulation.
Right.
I want a license to rent that place as a short-term rental. Because now they come and I say, here's my business license number, whatever, ever. And these people are no longer welcome on the premises, and it's a no-brainer. Just in a situation like that, that's a good thing because now you don't have those issues with, okay, somebody came and partied in your property and trashed it because I have the cooperation of the city and the authorities. And that, in my mind, alleviates a lot of those problems that people are complaining about. So I welcome it, but I want the right kind of legislation.
Well, it sounds like you need to go to some board meetings.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you need to do. You need to
or possibly, start your own kind of regulation whatever you want to call it at the meetings. I mean, you could bring it up at the meetings all you want.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, you could go, you mean like go to like city council meetings?
Yeah,
like
the city council, yeah. That's the word I was looking for.
Well, the other part of it is like let sleeping dogs lie.
Well, I don't know.
Like, do I want to go there and like make an issue of it? And then they're like, yeah, it's just banned in Charlotte.
Well,
because there's a lot of other points that people are going to say, well, you're taking away housing from traditional people, right? And we do have an affordable housing issue in Charlotte.
We do.
As many people that come to Charlotte every day, and even though they're building like crazy, a lot of it's not, quote, affordable. So are you contributing to the problem?
Probably not, because how many short-term rentals are there in Charlotte?
I don't know the exact number. I should know that, being in my market. But say there's 40,000, how many housing units are there in Charlotte, period? Well, I guarantee you that 40,000 in all of Charlotte is like less than 1%.
I was going to say, I bet the number of short-term rentals in Charlotte is less than 1% of the available housing in Charlotte.
So does it contribute to housing shortage? Yep, maybe less than 1%.
Right.
Right. But those are perceptions that you're working against.
That's true. There are some perceptions out there like that, but I don't know if it's backed up by data. It's just perception.
Yeah. I mean, I can argue both sides if you want to go down that path. I don't think we should, because we'll make this podcast way longer. But those are the kind of things I'm thinking about. Those are the kind of things I get asked questions about all the time. Like, what are you going to do about regulations? What are you going to do about... And so those are the kind of things that I pay attention to, because I want to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And sticking your head in my opinion, sticking your head in the sand and saying, well, we just don't want any regulation at all because, we don't want that is probably not going to pan out.
Well, it's eventually going to happen.
It's eventually probably going to happen.
It may not be next year. It may not be the year after that, but 5 years from now, more than likely it will happen.
Yes, but you got to make sure that your voice is in there. So
that's what I'm saying. By you going down there and advocating,
maybe you're right.
Advocating the voice.
This is the kind of discussions we have where when he's like,
you'd
why don't
be
you run for office?
Really good at that, though.
I could be, yeah, but I'm saying it takes more than one person. It needs to be multiple people. And somebody knows to organize it. Maybe it's me. Maybe I go organize it. I don't know. I don't want to make that commitment on this podcast that goes out to the world.
I'm just saying that you would
have that conversation.
I'm just saying that you would be really good at it.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. I don't want to go down that road because I don't want to say, okay, I'm now announcing my candidacy for, you know what I'm saying?
I don't think it's come to that just quite yet, but I think that in a couple of years.
But I do think it's important. I think it's important to educate and start thinking about that way, because
that's a really good idea.
You can't just put your head in the sand and say, hey, I'm just going to be like, okay, until it happens. And then.
Well, that's part of the reason that we do this podcast too, is to educate other operators on best practices and
sure
to listen to our successes and our failures, because every time we have a failure, we turn it into a success by establishing processes and
and like the stuff that happens
procedures.
These weekends aren't failures; they're just stuff that happens.
Well, they're learning experiences.
Successes because we
turned. That's right. We turned them into successes,
like a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we were good stewards of the community, and we did do the right thing. So there's all that, and all I worry about is that not everybody's doing that.
Well, I think it's important to
I want
start that kind of community and be the educational voice for the short-term rental space because it doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, we're not the only ones. It's not like we're the only ones talking.
No, and we have started that. Well, you did. You started that. You and another short-term rental operator started that Facebook page.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you can do in your local market is, start an association of short-term operators, and maybe it's just a Facebook page, that's people that are in your local group or local area, and you can kind of band together and come up with some ideas and that kind of thing.
And share best practices.
I
think that's what it's all about. It's all about education.
Yeah, I mean, give that stuff away.
Give it away for free, sure.
But again, I almost welcome regulation.
No doubt.
Which is weird to say as a short-term rental operator, right? Because you don't want it. You're like, no, I don't want them coming in and banning my stuff. And I don't either.
I don't want them to ban it totally.
No, I don't.
I'd go out of business.
I would not mind them coming on and saying, hey, you have to do it the way I do it.
Well, we would be...
Right?
We would be willing to jump through all those hoops because we do it already.
We do, yeah. So I go back to what I said, we self-regulate personally. Like now, I mean, we just do because we think it's the right thing to do and we think it's the right way to operate. And, all we can do right now is say, please, you do it too. Because it is actually in your best interest. You're going to be more profitable. You're going to have less problems. You're going to be a better business if you do operate with best practices.
And you won't impact the neighborhood negatively or the community. I mean, we want to impact the community positively.
Yeah, but I'm just saying as a business.
By bringing in business.
It affects your bottom line positively.
Well, think about it. People that are staying at our property are from out of town, and they are not staying at the property the whole time. They are going out to other businesses such as restaurants and bars and other entertainment venues and spending their money.
Oh, no doubt. It's a net positive for the economy, local economy. There's no doubt. Like I was looking at data today. Do you realize that the average hotel stay is 1.2 nights?
That blows my mind.
Which is basically a night. Like the average hotel stay is one night. You know what the average short-term rental stay is outside of hotels?
Was it 3 nights?
It's 5.
5 nights?
Nationwide, yeah.
Oh, nationwide.
I'm sure it's different in different markets.
Ours isn't 5 nights. I wish it were.
Ours is 3.
But that's still pretty good.
It's 3 times what a hotel does in Charlotte. And that means they stay an extra 2 days. And that means they spend an extra 2 days here spending money, right? And not to mention, we create jobs for cleaners, and we create jobs for our linen service, and we create jobs for our runner.
That is a very good point.
And we generate tax revenue for the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County because we do submit those as well.
That's right.
So it's a net positive for the community economically, for sure. So it's how do you become also a good citizen while doing that?
Well, it's about safety.
It's about trust and safety. Yeah.
Trust and safety.
And some of it's just perception.
It is.
Like I said, there's a lot of folklore out there. Like a lot of people, and that's why we say, hey, when you go look for a new property or whatever, don't say, hey, man, I want to set up an Airbnb and a rental. It's the worst thing you can say.
Right.
You know why? Because there's a lot of folklore about Airbnb. There's some people that are the first thing they're going to think is drunken college party at my place.
Yep. So
trash my
it
place.
Gets some negative publicity, that's for sure.
But in reality, being operators, how often does that actually happen?
Very rarely.
And even we're talking we had 2 quote bad guests. Did they actually damage the property?
Nope. There was no damage.
No, they did not. We had somebody smoke weed in one of our properties. It smells a little bad. We run the ozone machine. It's gone. It's not like they actually caused any damage. And it's not like they actually bothered the neighbors either. They were just who are all these people?
Right.
So
well, I mean, I understand the security concern. I don't want somebody dealing drugs across.
I understand it, but I'm saying that nothing actually happened bad. Like in reality. Like what were your damages?
Right.
Nothing.
But it could have escalated into something different, which is...
My only point was that I was saying there's a lot of folklore about what an Airbnb quote is. And it's not that. What is a short-term rental? It's not that. It's not drunken parties every weekend. It's just not. But that's the stuff that gets sensationalized, right?
That's exactly it, though.
That they're like, well, we're just banning it.
Right.
Right? And so it's good to have that conversation on the other side to say, hey, let's welcome some of that and let's set what the rules are so that we can have, because obviously there's a demand for it.
Right. And it's not going away.
It's not. I mean, when we travel, we serve families with children. It's us, 2 kids, and 2 dogs if we're going to take them, and we can't stay in a hotel. And we can, but it sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
I would rather get a house somewhere.
Yeah, with a fenced-in.
Like
yes, and that's exactly it.
And that's why people like that experience.
Yes, that's the experience that we aim to provide for people.
We want, and there's millions of other people like us.
Right.
The genie's out of the bottle. They're like, hey, we don't have to stay at the Super 8 anymore.
Yep.
Right? We can, actually have a good experience and experience what it's like to live in Charlotte in a house, and while we're visiting there, and maybe looking for our new home, or maybe, just there for leisure, visiting family or whatever. But there's a demand for it, is my point. And it's not going away, so we might as well come up with a way that makes sense for everybody. But I'm kind of getting on my soapbox again. This is when he's like, you should run for office.
I just think you'd be really good at it.
Maybe.
Well, we should wrap this up. So tell us what you think about regulating the short-term rental business. We would love to hear your take on this subject, and we will, if we get any feedback from this podcast, we should talk about it in the next podcast because it's such an interesting topic. It really is. If you would like to email us your thoughts on this, you can email us at info@thecashflowcouple.com. You can also find us on Facebook at The Cashflow Couple. We would love to hear from you. We read all of your messages, and we sure do appreciate you listening to our podcast. We hope that you find some value in this and like and share. We appreciate you guys very much.
And reviews.
I forgot about reviews.
It really helps for us to get reviews on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever it is that you listen.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.